Yeah, there's about a dozen popular news sources that we come, deal with each day, and they've all got a bunch of paywalls. And so, what we could do is every time I get to a New York Times article that has a pay that now they're paywalled. Bloomberg, New York Times, who else? Financial Times, and so that's three really notable ones that I run into every day. And what I could do is in the going forward, if somebody or some group of people pay for the New York Times monthly or annual subscription, then every time I read a New York Times article, I can thank that person for their they having paid for the having access for us all to enjoy that article. That could be very cool. Uh, like soft sponsorship shout out.
Wasn't
Or
really the point, but really just kind of. And sorry, this is your show, but it was really just because like you're already doing so much. Like I did, I figure if we get like far enough to read 3-4 lines into a headline and we see a paywall, it's like damn it. So let's just not let these little things kind of get in the way. Is my thought.
it's an interesting idea. But you know what I'll even try and do though is get an actual get one company to do all the paywalls for the year. So I'll figure out what the cost of all of the different paywalls are from all the popular publications, add them all up for 1 year, and then we can do that today. And then when we meet again later today, I'll be like, okay, here's the total price for 1 year of paywall free news of all the publications we dive into. And if we can get somebody's company to cover it, then every time we go into like New York Times, I'll be like, oh, and a special thanks to so and so for paying so that we get access to all of these articles. So we could do that for as an annual thing. That could be easier. That could be very cool. Um, Mabwana, you were jumping in there, and thanks again, Chris.
Yeah, just a quick hello. I'm recovering from my vaccination vacay. I'm driving in Nairobi now, 3 hours. Well, the audience, but I tipped you for my in-car payment for the next 3 hours before I drive in. So I'll be sitting this one out, but it's, thanks for all the work, Tyler.
Yeah,
So anytime
Did
I'm
you
driving and enjoying the community, I'm going to tip just to remind myself that
your
good.
your your audio's really
yeah.
really feeble, really tinny.
Yeah.
And did
No
you
worries. I'm
remember
off.
to
I'm
take
off.
video this time, Magwana? Did you remember to take
Um,
video this time?
no videos this time. Been a bit busy, but yeah, I'm just driving. So yeah, enjoy the. I'll be listening, but enjoy
Okay,
the session.
alrighty,
Take care.
let's do it. Let's get into it. There's some crazy stuff happening. Um, let's do the
So
big.
what's the shit that you figured out? We
We
can do
oh,
that
Oh, it's
later.
good. You're
okay.
gonna you're gonna love it, Carl.
I'm now. Oh, you've got FOMO on me
Well,
now.
good.
What
We got
shit did you figure? No, you can do that
Many.
whenever it makes sense.
yeah. Well, my Mikael, who's joining on stage, can actually help us figure it out as well. And Renjant is the one who instigated this yesterday, and it's quite interesting because let's see here. Let's get up. There's a few more friendly people hiding in the audience that need to jump up on stage. So this is crazy. So let me find the articles. Essentially, it started out with, let's unpack this from the start. There was, of course, hacking has been going on for a very long time, everywhere, all the time. That's a thing. And then the Colonial Pipeline hack was this kind of pivotal moment of with these ransomwares where it was like, ah, shit, this is like some key um, national infrastructure that's being hit. And do you remember when that first headline came out? We thought, oh, is this the beginnings of a cyber war? Is this, state actors? Is this Russia? Is it, we didn't know. And then we watched that drama twice a day, every day, over multiple weeks now. And we have a much better sense of what that's all about. And then there was a meat production, not just any meat production, the largest meat production facility in the US was hit. And we thought they were not necessarily connected. Okay, it is what it is, whatever, interesting. But again, core kind of infrastructure stuff. And when the pipeline was hit, on the East Coast, Colonial Pipeline, it shut down a lot of gas stations on the East Coast. And there was also reports and photos of people, waiting for gas that wasn't there, and with their cars abandoned at gas stations because they ran out of gas near a gas station. And then Joe Biden went to meet with Vladimir Putin in Geneva. And at that meeting, one of the most important things that came out of that meeting was Uncle Joe telling Big Vladdy Daddy, don't mess with our infrastructure. And here are specifically 16 infrastructure things that you are not to touch. And if you do, there will be retaliations, very namely your oil pipeline that were of the oil you sell to Europe that enables your country to even function. And that will be gone if you fuck with our infrastructure, specifically these 16 things. And Vlad said, okay, we will look into it. And sure enough, we've not, since then, interestingly, there hasn't been a key infrastructure attack. However, there has been, as we all know, this supermarkets in Sweden were hit, and that was kind of peculiar. And we really got to ping in Johan for this, because this is right up his alley. And let's see if Johan's around. Then Renjens found out that it was not only were the supermarkets in Sweden hit, which, by the way, Coop, that's one of the big three. So you're talking about 30% of supermarkets shut down, which might affect 40% of people, maybe even 50% of people. Coop is arguably the largest of the three. A lot of people impacted by that. And because most Swedish towns have maybe one supermarket, not all three. And so you might now need to go get on a train to go to the next town to go to the supermarket, and hoping they don't have a Coop in the town next door as well. They have an ICA or a Hemshop or whatever. So then it was found out that the hackers actually were trying to attack the SJ, which is the trains, which is also infrastructure, which is also how people get around in Sweden, unlike the oil pipeline in the US, which is you Americans get around by cars. We don't use trains. In Sweden, they use a lot of trains, actually. And the idea that they were attacking the food and the trains, and then the pharmacies were also owned by a food company, one of the other big supermarkets. And so it's very interesting now that these attacks are not random, meaning if you were having random attacks, you would have supermarkets in Sweden and then the train in I don't know, Poland, and then the pharmacies in Lithuania. But the fact they were all near the same time, like really within a 48-hour window, also at the time that the prime minister had just resigned. So the government is no longer functioning as normal. The prime minister resigns. So it's kind of in this weaker state politically. As that happens, this attack happens that's focused on food and transportation, just as in the US, food and transportation. And we told, Russia, don't target our infrastructure or you're fucked. And who is Russia's second favorite or least favorite country? Well, most Americans don't know. Swedes know that Sweden and Russia are not exactly friends. And every Swede knows this because we have Russian submarines cruising off the coast of Sweden very regularly. And to the anxiety of most Swedes, actually. And in the why does Russia feel some kind of animosity towards Sweden? Doesn't really have any animosity towards Russia, to be fair. Russia does feel a lot of animosity towards Sweden, however, and in fact, Vladimir Putin claims one of the key reasons he needed to take Crimea from the Ukraine was to prevent the Ukraine from joining the EU because of Sweden he claimed was the secret instigator in trying to pull Ukraine into the EU, which he was not going to let happen. And to stop it from happening, he went into Crimea and took Crimea to kind of destabilize it and put it in a state where it's no longer able to join the EU. So just to give you an idea as to how much he dislikes Sweden. So at putting it on the second, number 2 of his target list of potential cyber attacks, coincidentally, again, targeting food and transportation at a time when their prime minister had just resigned, kind of in a softer political state. Now it's going to be really interesting in the next 1, 2, 3 days to see if there's another attack in Sweden, because what if this were to escalate further? What would we expect to see as a potential target? Would it be the internet itself, or the electrical grid, or something like that? Because if that happens, Swedes need to get wake. I mean, that would be a huge alarm bell that shit's about to go down. Because, by the way, and people mistakenly think that if Russia attacks Sweden, that the entire of Europe and America notably would come to its defense. However, Sweden has a rather creative association with NATO, the North American militarized union, where they are not part of the military cooperation of NATO. So they don't have the "I got your back, you got my back" NATO alliance. They have some NATO cooperation, but not military alliance with NATO. So the whole point of joining NATO is if Russia, literally the whole point of NATO is if Russia attacks your country, all the other NATO countries have your back. Well, Sweden's
What
not
would
part
a
of.
what would a globally confrontational Sweden look like? Like it's interesting if we get to that.
No, but my point is of course, Russia can really only consider attacking a country who isn't a part of NATO's military alliance, which Sweden is not.
Ah, I see. Yeah. That makes sense.
So let's hope the internet doesn't go out anytime soon there, or any other key infrastructure that might be relevant to a potential aggressive escalation of aggression by one Mr. Vladimir Putin. We'll see. We will
All this
see.
seems to have, accelerated after Trump left, right? I mean, like the
Oh,
Russian
what an
stuff,
interesting coincidence! What
right?
an interesting coincidence! Yeah.
Hi, Tyler.
Hello, Messi.
But I guess
Hi. This morning I was listening to a news from CNN, and then they were talking about working with even experts from the blockchain people in tracking down all those ransom monies. So I was just wondering, even what happened to the decentralized kind of money payment. So that was quite interesting for me to listen to that, and how they are also working with the FBI already in tracking down already paid, as well as already in cracking down from things happening already. So to me, that was quite interesting, even to see people from the blockchain are cooperating and working with the FBI. So I'm done speaking, sorry.
could I
Yeah.
add something, Tyler?
Go ahead, Michael.
All right. So first, Cope is about just short of 20% of the market in
Okay.
Sweden, like 19 or something.
Right,
ICA,
because there's more. There's more
ICA,
than just 3. Yeah. ICA's the
exactly.
biggest. Yeah.
They have about 50% of the market share, and they own the pharmacies, etc. But also adding to this, yesterday, a major Swedish petrol company was hit as well. With
Right. Gas.
non-functioning, yes,
Shell gas stations. Yeah.
exactly, with non-functioning payments. And I think you should regard this not as sort of an attack on Sweden, but rather the hacker version of what Silicon Valley is doing in Sweden. We're a great test bed with a lot of monoculture in terms of technology. So it's if you're able to hack one, you're able to hack many, because we all have pretty much the same tech stack and tech solutions. But Sweden as a country or a nation is rather uninteresting on a geopolitical stage, so to speak. However, it's great to test out, mobile scooters, online payments, and of course, hacks. So I think that's what's going on.
That's even
We're
scarier, right?
being tested.
That's even
Yes.
scarier.
Yes, I
Wow.
would say it's even scarier because they try out the stuff here, okay, we're able to hack this, that, and that. Now we can do like a global threat or an American threat, or hitting something where it really hurts. Because for the global economy, it doesn't matter if Sweden goes down altogether, I would say,
Right.
more or less.
Yeah. It's funny, some of the headlines around this, for example, Financial Times version of this headline says Russia linked hackers target IT supply chain with ransomware, meaning, and then it even says Sweden's Coop grocery store chain. So the Financial Times is saying Russia linked hackers. And then in India, one of the big papers there says Russian ransomware group strikes again, attacking 800 stores in Sweden. And then BBC says some 500 Coop supermarkets in Russia have been forced to close. The firm believes the Russian-linked Revo ransom. All the journalists are saying it's Russian-linked, anyways.
Yeah,
So
Tyler.
I don't,
But
just to address that. Yeah, Cheryl?
Tyler, I just DM you one from TechCrunch with which actually explain a bit on the technical aspect.
Yeah,
Apparently,
that's what I
those
was gonna say.
companies that will hit around the world, right? They have one commonality, which they actually use some
Citrix.
solutions from this Miami-based company. So they are actually the gateway for the ransomware attack. So basically, there are many companies that don't even know that their monitor system is actually through this company. So you can look at the TechCrunch article that I just sent you. Yeah.
I saw that when
yeah,
it came out 3 days ago, Cheryl. What that's about is there's a separate attack in the U.S. that attacked 1,000 companies in the U.S. on the 4th of July, which is not a coincidence. But they are very intentionally not targeting the 16 infrastructure items that Joe Biden told Vladimir Putin to not touch, or else you're fucked. So they're not touching the ones that will cause their country to go into a shithole overnight. But they are fucking with everything else, which is these 1,000 small companies that are not core infrastructure.
Yeah.
yeah. I
Yes.
would add one
And
more thing just to the theory of Sweden
Okay.
being a testbed. So Sweden is not poor in IT security. You might think so, looking at all the hacks. But if you look at where we actually are in like competitions like Locked Shields, Sweden actually won in the world this year in 2021. So we're
Yep.
actually, I would say, the best in cybersecurity, and
Yeah,
still this
one of
is
the best.
happening. So you can imagine what this is sort of a precedent for.
Yeah. Other
Tyler, can I add?
yes.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Ranjit.
yeah, I agree with what Cheryl and Mikkel has told. So I also think that this probably is not not a direct attack towards Sweden. Unfortunately, this system, this Kaseya system, is being integrated to Visma, which is one of the major companies in Sweden where a lot of accounting integration is being done. So Visma is having an integration towards this Kaseya. So that is actually the major concern. And Visma is being used by, so if you see all these customers who had problems, whether it was Shell, Coop, Apotheke, all these were using this Visma systems. So that is one of the reason why all these, so that is a common connection actually. But on the other side, I wonder whether there were more systems attacked because Visma had a lot of huge customer base. So that is something to be explored or maybe coming out in the upcoming days. So the common of all these things is this Visma integration. Number two, couple of interesting things happened after our last meeting was it. Coop's, the scan and pay app has become number one in the Sweden Play Store in Apple. So that was quite interesting, which means they are getting a big boost on it. And there were, I think, 100 plus stores already opened of Coop. They have put out a list now which stores are open now and which stores are using scan and pay and which stores they can use the Casa systems. So there has been constant updates from Coop, like about the shop opening, but they are still not sure
Okay.
when 100% is up.
All
Thanks.
right. Thank you for that. So, and a whole separate other really interesting thing happening since you were away, Cal. So that's number one, right? Kind of interesting. But here's another one. Where did it go? Where did it go? Where did it go? One second.
I grew a lot of hair though. I mean, sorry, I lost a lot of
Yes.
hair.
Yeah, you did. That's what
Yeah,
happens if you
yeah. Other
miss
than the
one day
news
of tech
stories, I
news.
just lost a bit of hair, but that's okay.
Where did it go? It did. This article just came out an hour ago. Damn it! Where did it go? I had it ready. So the this sucks. I gotta find it. Um, the big news yesterday was that the big tech companies, namely Apple, Google, Facebook, Amazon, um, are all members of the Asia Internet Coalition, which sent a letter to Hong Kong telling Hong Kong, hey, Hong Kong, you've got this new kind of data proposal that would put our companies at risk. And if it goes through, we're just letting you know. Of course, it's your country, and you can do what you want with your country. But we're not going to be able to stay and do business in Hong Kong if this passes. And there's now an update an hour ago that I lost the link on my browser, the tab on my browser. But Carrie Lam, the boss of Hong Kong, said, "Go fuck yourself. We honestly don't care at all," which I predicted. If you Cal is confused because he wasn't here, but I made the point that this is precisely what Hong Kong wants, actually. And so when the response now from Hong Kong, Carrie Lam, the boss of Hong Kong, saying that she's not bothered at all by this, well, of course she's not bothered by that. She's actually incredibly happy that you're saying you're going to leave Hong Kong. So, because that's the entire point of this new regulation, is just a funny little cute little game of just similar to India with Twitter, where India removed Twitter's protections as a platform protection. So they're now responsible for what happens on their platform. Twitter cannot operate under those situations, and Twitter knows that. And India knows that. So it's essentially a soft way of kicking an app out of your country without kicking them out of their country. It makes them look like it was their option to leave, when in reality they're not able to function if they don't have a platform, if they're personally responsible for what 1.5 billion people are saying on their platform. And that's evidenced by the fact that the managing director of Twitter in India was brought into the police station just a day after that went into effect, and indeed was going to be jailed. And then he resigned and quit, and we assume fled. And that's why they weren't able to replace that person, even though it was critical that they do so. They replaced it with somebody from outside of India in the US, which does not comply with India's demands that there needs to be somebody on the ground. But good luck finding somebody who knows they're going to take a role that essentially ensures that they will be imprisoned. So Twitter's in a hot seat in India, to say the least. But back to the big tech with Hong Kong, the Hong Kong new anti-doxing proposal could put tech companies at risk, says the new letter from Apple, Google, Facebook, and Amazon, all members of the Asia Internet Coalition, which wrote the letter. The new letter, which the tech industry group is driving home the risks of Hong Kong's proposed new rules, sent to Hong Kong's Privacy Commissioner for Personal Data by the Asia Internet Coalition, of Google, Apple, Facebook as members. The letter argues that the new measures would have an extreme impact on due process in Hong Kong and could result in the major US tech companies ceasing operations there. And then I gotta find the response headline. It must be in South China Morning Post, right? scmp.com.
And so effectively, the Hong Kong leadership is saying, yeah, so what, right?
Yes,
It's fine.
exactly.
We can live
Precisely.
with it.
That's what
Yeah,
came
that would
an
make
hour.
sense. That would make
Not only,
sense.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly an hour ago that happened. So I got to find that so we can read it, because there's an actual little quote of like, oh, that's so. I mean, they didn't even. Oh wait, I had it on Twitter from Jeremy. Hold on, because he's a journalist on the ground in Hong Kong that I follow. And let's go to Jeremy. And where is Jeremy? Oh man, how did I lose this article? Hold on a second. Where are you? Anyway, I'll find it. It'll pop up here in a
Yeah,
minute.
no, the point's solid though. Yeah, we can get back to it.
Okay, so the biggest news at the moment is, according to the Wall Street Journal, this whole other drama around Didi, and this is interesting too. This one is a weird development. But by the way, before we move on, let's stop to understand the point that if Google and Apple and Facebook and Amazon all leave Hong Kong, Hong Kongers are not so happy about that. Twitter as well is part of that, and that's quite a blow. Quite a blow. And it's there's some dots that might connect to this. There's just different dots. They may or may not connect. And the dots are that there was a publication called Apple Daily where the leader of that, Jimmy Lai, was incarcerated. The paper was shut down. Jimmy is a billionaire. He's a very notable Hong Kong personality and is very vocally anti. Well, I guess you should say he's very pro Hong Kong. He's huge on the freedoms of Hong Kong, and he's a journal. He has a big publication, and he's really big on freedom of press and freedom of speech in Hong Kong. And he doesn't like anyone challenging Hong Kong's freedom of speech and freedom of press, which that changed recently. And so he became incredibly irate that the regular Hong Kong's was changing in a way that he didn't like, and because people weren't allowed to protest or say. There's a lot of new things they're not able to say as part of this new law that came into effect in Hong Kong, and he became incredibly vocal against it on Twitter. And then he started being followed. It was being reported. He was being followed all over the place. So he knew he was being followed. And then eventually the followers eventually did come into his house and take him out of his office, out of his home, took him down to jail, and And now they shut down the business. And then they caught one of the editors at the airport leaving Hong Kong. And they wouldn't, that was in the last 3 days. And that was kind of interesting. And then anyway, and the accounts were frozen, so they couldn't save the paper financially because the government kind of froze the bank accounts, and it's a very sad situation. Anyway, then the next day, Jimmy Lai is kind of been neutralized as a threat. Apple Daily's gone. He's not on Twitter. He's kind of locked up. And then there was a library and a bookstore that was confronted about having his books available at the library and at the bookstore. And so they decided, no, you can't have these Jimmy Lai books here. Well, why not? This had nothing to do with Apple Daily. It doesn't really have much to do with Jimmy Lai. The books aren't going to say something tomorrow that might offend you. These books have been around for a very long time. They're not magically going to change and start saying things tomorrow. What was known in them has been known for a while. Why do they need to be removed now? And more importantly, why do the physical books need to be removed when the digital versions of the books are one click away on the internet that you can download at any time? And that's a little indicator that the internet of Hong Kong could potentially be shut down, because now that the people on the ground physically and the books in the physical form of the books are being removed, that's an indication that they will need to necessarily remove the digital form of the books, because those digital forms of those books say the same things that the physical forms of the books say. And if you want more evidence of that, there was a young gentleman, a law student, who was the youngest member of Hong Kong's legislature at the age of 23. He went to Yale Law School. He wrote a website on a Wix. Wix allows you to make a very simple website. He made a very simple website, which included some information that Hong Kong didn't appreciate. So they contacted Wix and had the website taken down. And then he, as a law student, contacted Wix, which is based in Israel, and said, hey, I didn't do anything illegal with my website. Please put my website back. And they did. And they apologized publicly for taking down his website. And then, as my friend Jane, the geek in Hong Kong, predicted correctly, oh, I know what happens next. Hong Kong's going to call the internet service providers, the telecom's actual pipes, to Wix and shut that down. And they did. And that's how we know they're going to shut down the internet in Hong Kong with regard to freedom of speech. When they see things they don't like on the internet, they're literally going to cut the pipes to those things. And guess what? Twitter and Facebook and Google are full of stuff, absolutely packed with stuff that they don't like Jimmy Lai's book. So I predicted 2 weeks ago they're going to shut down the Western internet in Hong Kong. They don't really have a choice because there's no point in forcing everyone in Hong Kong to not say anything ever in any context, in print, in a book, in a magazine, in a newspaper, or verbally, or even on the street, where you can't hold up a sign of any kind that says anything they don't like. You will be arrested instantly, and you can't even hold up a sign that doesn't say anything. A blank sign is now considered against the rules because that was recognized as a form of protest, that we've been silenced, that we can't even say anything on a sign. And a blank sign with nothing on it showing that I can't even speak, I've been silenced, is itself a form of protest, and you will be arrested for that. So if you're going to go to that extreme of silencing people physically, well, then of course you're going to silence them digitally.
And I think people who can leave are leaving, right? As far as we understand.
Well, yeah,
Certainly, they're coming to the UK because
the
UK
guy
is
from
gonna.
the editor from Apple Daily tried exactly that and was apprehended as he was trying to leave the airport in Hong Kong 3 days
I'm
ago.
talking about everyday people too, right? And entrepreneurs, and I imagine they're going to Singapore too. They're coming to the UK. I know that in London, the house prices are getting a little bit of a spike because at least the flats and things, because and the UK is actually inviting them in. They've made special visas and things
Well,
that they're working through.
that got very interesting as well, and somebody knows more than I do on this point for sure, which is the UK even issued some sort of passport for something like 3 million Hong Kongers or something.
Yeah, Kai might know
And
something about that, but yeah, it's solid. They did that,
but
and
yeah, but then the government said, those aren't real or something to that effect. Like they said other countries are not allowed to recognize that. And it's like, well, it doesn't really matter. It's just for them to get in the UK, and the UK recognizes it. They're the ones issuing it.
that's the only one that
And
matters. Yeah.
yeah,
And Tedder,
well,
your
kind
point
of.
on the pipes and on the internet and on the control that wields, in a sense, you can, in the UK context, you can think about why the government was so thoughtful about the telco providers providing the 5G backbone.
So somebody just found the article I was looking for, and it was from the South China Morning Post. And it's but this is paywall, damn it, to our point. Funny that this one's paywall, the others aren't. The Facebook, Google, and other tech giants could stop offering services in Hong Kong. BB sent it in, and I don't know if this is the one. You know what it is I tweeted from the Tech News Twitter account right before we came into this room the link that I'm missing stupidly. Now I remember where it was. I didn't
All
need to
right.
save it because
Can
where
we
is it?
just do a little bit of a Chris conspiracy theory? What
Go
if
ahead.
those paywalls, like when you go sign up and they see like a .cn address, they're like, all right, let's play the good version of the story.
What happened?
Like if they knew you were from China and would present a different version of the story, only on paywalled versions of the
Oh,
site.
right. Right.
Anyways, that's just my conspiracy theory. Sorry.
I guess I didn't tweet the link out. This is becoming mysterious.
I'm
I
I'm
know it
looking through
exists.
our scroll now, Tyler. Like I'm looking at 11
No,
minutes. I can't see it.
it's not there.
Yeah.
But one
What is the
one that
article about? I can Google again.
that the Carrie Lam's response
Okay.
to the big tech companies warning that they're leaving Hong Kong, warning that they would leave Hong Kong if this new privacy law comes into effect. So CarrieLam, it's got to be in the news for her. It's like right at the top. Carrie Lam to deliver. Hong Kong leader Carrie Lam says ideologies pose security. Claim trust.
This is basically a PR disaster if he says that, and
yeah,
government is not going to budge for. I mean, big company, however big the companies think they are.
I found it. Here it is. So the article reads, Hong Kong dismisses Google Facebook warning over privacy laws. Asian industry group that includes Google, Facebook, and Twitter is threatening to quit Hong Kong over new anti-doxing legislation. Carrie Lam, the chief executive of Hong Kong, has brushed off a warning by major tech companies, including Google, Facebook, and Twitter, that they may quit the Chinese-controlled city if authorities go ahead with plans to change privacy law. Lam told reporters on Tuesday that the proposed, that's today, that means it's Tuesday morning here in the past few hours, Lam told reporters on Tuesday that the proposed changes would only target illegal doxing, the practice of sharing people's private details online with their consent. The practice came under scrutiny in Hong Kong during the anti-government protests of 2019 when police officers were targeted after their details of their release online. Some of the officers' home addresses and children's schools were also exposed, and they and their families were targeted with threats. The Hong Kong government is now proposing changes to the city's privacy laws, including imposing a 1-year jail term and a maximum fine of 1 million Hong Kong dollars, which is about $128,000, for offenders who disclose personal data without consent. Meaning, if somebody puts personal information online, there will be you could get a 1-year jail term and a $128,000 fine, which for some reason the platforms are also punishable if somebody's doxing on their platforms. So that's where the platform said, we've read this, our lawyers have read it, and it puts us at risk of having our team members jailed. And so we can't risk that. So that's why we would need to step out if this goes through. And her response is, well, don't put any private information of any individuals online without their permission. And to which Google and Facebook say, do you know how many people we have using this platform? How many crazy people we have? And by the way, you could put somebody on there against our wishes and get us in hot water. And anyone who wishes us harm could do that. So the introducing sanctions aimed at individuals is not aligned with global norms and trends. A letter from what Google and Facebook and the coalition, Asian Internet Coalition, said is, in regards to this, and the contents of the letter were first reported by the Wall Street Journal yesterday. Introducing sanctions aimed at individuals is not aligned with global norms and trends, the letter from the Asia Internet Coalition said, adding that any anti-doxing legislation must be built upon principles of necessity and proportionality. The group warned the only way to avoid these sanctions for technology companies would be to refrain from investing and offering their services in Hong Kong, thereby depriving Hong Kong businesses and consumers, whilst also creating new barriers to trade. Lam, however, dismissed those concerns today, Tuesday, likening the new legal changes to a China-imposed national security law that she said had been slandered and defamed. The security law imposed in June last year punishes any acts Beijing deems as secession, subversion, terrorism, and collusion with foreign forces. Rights groups have said that the laws has decimated freedoms in semi-autonomous Hong Kong, but the city government said it has restored stability after the protests of 2019. With the changes to the privacy law, Lam said her government was only targeting illegal doxing and empowering the privacy commissioners to investigate and carry out operations. And she added that the city's privacy commission would be happy to meet tech industry representatives to deal with any anxieties they may have, but suggested her government was determined to press forward with fast tracking the new changes. Of course, it would be ideal to relieve this anxiety when we make the legislation, but sometimes it needs to be demonstrated via implementation. And Lam went on to express dismay at some residents mourning the death of 50-year-old who stabbed a policeman. Blah, blah, blah. We'll see. Let's see. It's not. There will be more comments from both sides in the days to come, no doubt, which we will analyze closely.
Tyler, do you think it's got the potential to, obviously there's going to be one frame of dialogue between this rebel alliance or this alliance of tech companies and Lam, but then is there another dialogue, a people dialogue? Would there be such a kind of depth of feeling of the people that would really rail against this, or to what extent do you think that's going to happen?
What you're talking about, the Hong Kongers?
Yes.
The Hong Kongers did a 7 million person march. I mean, that's nearly the entire population of Hong Kong came out in protest during when these laws were coming into place during the mass protests. That didn't change anything. I mean, they had completely surrounded the government buildings. 100 people deep. That was uh,
Okay.
uh,
And last
it
question
was
is
it,
this
some of the biggest it was a remarkable, an unprecedented protest out expression of protest. I'm trying to think of other equal versions of that scale of protest where nearly 100% of people in a geography participate. It's kind of unprecedented. So they couldn't
got it.
really do much more than what they did.
Yeah, massive, massive feeling. And what does this word doxing mean? Sorry if it's something that
Doxing is a word meaning taking somebody's address. Normally, it's your private information, like your address of your home or where you work, or your phone number or your social security number, private details, and putting it online, which any Swede would laugh at because all of everybody's stuff is online publicly in Sweden. So it's quite difficult to dox somebody in Sweden. So, but yeah, the idea of exposing somebody's private information, that's what doxing is.
got it. Thank you.
And the most commonly um, um, used simplification would be publishing somebody's home address, for example.
Got it.
Yeah. So the yeah, we'll see. We got to watch. We're gonna watch that. So there's now people are starting to cover this. Well, more people are covering the letter that the Google and Facebook and Amazon and Twitter and them sent in, and now people are starting to report Carrie Lam's response, which just happened, a few hours ago, where it says Hong Kong moves to ease fears as Facebook, Google, Twitter threaten to pull out of the city over new privacy law. Carrie Lam says free speech concerns expressed by Facebook, Twitter, and Google over the new anti-doxing law will be proved wrong, and that the new legislation is simply aims to tackle malicious online behavior. Okay, let's hope so. I know the Hong Kongers certainly hope so. So let's stay optimistic. So what are the big headlines of the day? Still today, the biggest headline in the tech sphere at this moment is the DD US IPO, and this is another one where it's just there's a little confusion as to what's really going on here. They did the IPO, then China tells Apple and Google to remove the apps from the store, so there's no new signups. And then it was reported that China launches new probes into two other companies, which have the miraculous coincidence of also being, like Didi, listed on the New York Stock Exchange, which raises the question, is that a coincidence? Because there's not that many Chinese tech companies on the New York Stock Exchange. I mean, there's not zero, but that's a weird coincidence that three of them would all happen within the same 48 hours. And what kind of signal is that sending? And some suggested that maybe China would prefer that the Chinese tech companies not list in the New York Stock Exchange, but they could have easily have prevented, I assume, they could have prevented Didi from doing that. So why let them do it and then, quote unquote, kind of punish them? It seems a little
They
strange.
they,
But
they did actually
yeah,
talk to Didi for
yeah,
many times, and
mm-hmm.
Didi didn't listen. Yeah, I found out more about this afterwards, and the more I
Okay,
kind of dig deep into it, Tyler,
yeah,
the more I realized Didi is definitely in deep trouble. So the policy is such that any internet company with a lot of data, basically, they are not going to be allowed to IPO in foreign stock exchange, especially US stock exchange. So that is the unwritten rule, and in fact they all know about it. But I think DD just perhaps got a little bit too much arrogancy with it, because the Didi is well, one of the daughter, well, the daughter of the legendary Chinese entrepreneur, the original founder of Lenovo. And he's in Didi, so they think that they can ride above the government, so they're going to be paying a very, very, very heavy lesson. Yeah.
Yeah. That
To
seems
Kai's
strange that
point,
it
have
would.
you seen the headline that came out yesterday? You might have reported it while I wasn't here, but on Wall Street, sorry, was it on? Well, so I saw it on CNBC. It's Chinese regulators suggested Didi delay its US IPO. Wall Street Journal reports, but I saw it on CNBC, and I tweeted it. It's out there on the Tech News Twitter account. But the China cybersecurity watchdog suggested Didi Global delay its IPO weeks before it went public, the Wall Street Journal reported, citing sources. China's cybersecurity watchdog suggested Didi Global delay its initial urged to review its network. So they were. This article is suggesting that they had suggested to them. It isn't known whether Didi carried out its own review, according to Wall Street Journal, but a person close to the company told the newspaper the company ultimately decided to go ahead with the IPO as it faced increased investor pressure for a big payout. Cheryl's hypothesis yesterday, right?
It also
Yeah.
says, Cal, a little down the article, it also says that Didi actually denies that they had any knowledge of the investigation
Sure.
prior to going to IPO. So
Well,
that's it.
it's actually well. Come on, logically, whatever DD claim is not going to stand. For example, let me give everybody a couple of examples. For everybody who works for Chinese foreign Ministry of Foreign Relations, and basically on DD, if you use the application, you choose a start point and you choose an end point. So it's very easy to find out how many people go to basically the certain military base or Chinese foreign Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Yeah, and it's very easy to do data analysis of who goes to these places a certain time in a day, and everybody go use DD would have to have their mobile phone number recorded, so those information can easily be correlated to other WeChat spending power. And so basically, oh my God, it means that once you control somebody's movement and also and also cross-reference their spending pattern on WeChat, you can do a lot of things. So DD absolutely just like they have all the information, and exactly as Tyler said, once you have all this juicy information, all this information can easily be spinned as sensitive information. There's no escape. The Didi have no chance. I don't think. I think
But
that,
Kai,
yeah.
Kai, on this thing, but based on the hypothesis that Cheryl put out yesterday and this article, right, and the fact they're warned by the regulators and they still did it, and knowing and understanding as you do, and me a little bit, but not as like 1% of what you understand, how China works, they basically went against some government ministers' views, right? Some government officials, at least the security people or other people, and that takes a lot of guts in China, right? So
It's because,
that's
Carl, it's because the senior leadership in DD has a lot of international influence. I shared the example with
Yeah.
everybody yesterday, and
Yeah.
the same goes with the Hong Kong legal system. The reason why Chinese government is coming down hard on Hong Kong legal system is because if you look at the Hong Kong legal system, actually it's still under control of a lot of British. And so Chinese government basically see that as something that they must take action. And so I think, well, basically DD is going to be, when whatever you read on Wall Street Journal, it's only a tiny fraction compared with the kind of like Chinese media. I mean, I can tell you guys, I mean, on Chinese media, DD is basically demonized already. They're finished.
Mm.
Kai, can I ask you a question? So did the Chinese
That
policy
but that
change
hold on,
recently?
Cheryl.
Yeah.
That was incredibly valuable stock trading information that he just
Yeah.
gave. But go ahead, Cheryl.
Yeah. Did the Chinese policy change recently? Because if you are talking about data, I'm sure Alibaba has the most data. So why are they allowed to be listed in US?
So the thing with it's a good question, Cheryl. I mean, the thing about China is that, I mean, obviously I'm a British. I do a lot of business in China. In China, you cannot do business based on just written or published information or rules. You got to actually. I mean, in China, we have this thing called read between lines, right? It means a lot of rules are not fully written, so you have to talk to local government and also real local expert and follow local advice on what to do. If a senior government official come from several important organizations ask you not to do anything, you need to listen, even though the rules is not publicly written. So for in Didi's case, actually they have been penalized and warned about 20 times in recent years. For example, the Chinese Ministry of Transport warned them that they did not have enough transparency on how they charge, the percentage set. And Didi actually was in a lot of trouble because of the immensely powerful family background. They think they can navigate it all. And so it became a bit of a gamble. The senior Didi leadership, they felt that number one, they're very well connected. Number two, they provide so much job. Number three, they're in a very strong position in the market. They used to be dominant. But what they didn't realize is that Meituan is super strong as well. And there are a lot of government support behind Meituan. So a lot of the things happening in China is not going to be well written. You really, if any company want to operate in China, you need to have people who is totally versed in Chinese culture and actually know the right people, so that you can know the unwritten rules. And usually those unwritten rules are far more influential and meaningful than the written rules.
The BBC just put out an article now about the big tech Hong Kong update with Carrie Lam's response that essentially the tech companies are expressing their concern because it would give the authorities in Hong Kong the ability to force the tech companies to remove content, and then the tech companies are saying that the local representatives that they have in Hong Kong are not able to comply with forced removals. So that's sort of the standoff as it is at the moment, that because the team members in Hong Kong are not engineers, essentially they're business development people who are not don't even have access to go in and make the changes that the Hong Kong would essentially inevitably something's going to happen on their platforms, and Hong Kong will now, with this new law, have the legal authority to force these changes to happen. And they're saying, well, the people who are on the ground in Hong Kong would be, if we don't remove it, they would be, according to this, also, potentially jailed and fined, and they themselves don't even have the power to make the changes that are being requested on the ground, and that's where it gets into a sticky situation. But as I said, we'll probably get even more comments from both sides in the days to come, so it'll be interesting to see how that evolves.
So one of
yeah,
the things,
of course.
Tyler, I was going to ask, since Faraz is here, is Faraz, I don't know if you're with us, but what do you think the Cloud Act has to do with China's decisions here? Basically, if Didi was a American-owned company, would they be subject to the Cloud Act, and then therefore their servers able to be accessed by the U.S. government at anywhere? I don't know if he's here.
Well, I can't
Here.
comment about Cloud Act, but what I can assure is that DD, the U.S. stock exchange laws means that the companies kind of IPO there has to report a lot of information and also additional information. And so that's definitely see what we're essentially a witness, Chris, is plain and simple. I mean, China and US is going through well, in polite word, it's called decoupling, but in plain language, it's a full scale Cold War. It's on already. I mean, one thing that probably never going to be shared on English mainstream media is that more than 500 students from China was denied or hustled. Basically not able to actually go to US for study, both for undergrad level and the PhD level for engineering and science related subject. And so obviously China is making big news about it, and US is not going to mention anything. And these are the people who are already studying US, and some of them actually apply and accepted by U.S. Universities after Biden actually took office. So I think the China-US relationship is particularly sensitive at the moment, and it's not going the right direction at all. So this, given this as a main background, I mean, I think it's easier to actually understand a lot of dynamics in the geopolitics, basic
Hey, Kai,
scenarios. Yeah.
while you're here, the 100th anniversary of the CCP party birthday party, like 100-year anniversary celebration, which was televised about 1 or 2 days ago or so. the the U.S. media was kind of taken back by some of the stronger. There was stronger language than was expected in some cases.
I find that report quite baffling. To be honest, I don't read the same information at all on China, and UK's position on China is a lot more complicated because UK has a lot stronger economical interest with to China, and of course, don't forget that UK is one of the first major European country, Western country, to recognize a communist party regime from 1949, and
Yeah.
so I don't think there were much discussion on this in UK. I read from Chinese media that actually he asked the media in China to be softer. I mean, he doesn't want to China to, especially youth in China, to have this war wolf attitude on US. I mean, I think he is a very sensible person. China is a long way behind US in terms of military and political and economical might. I don't think he wants China to be so. I mean, China. I mean, he does not see China as number two, effectively speaking, and China is still a developing country. That's what he want to want everybody to know. But of course, media is different, especially a lot of like personal media. Personal media want followers, so they like to focus on certain headline just to attract eyeballs. And I wouldn't read too much into it. I can assure you that as somebody who read Chinese news every day, I don't think she would see China as a competitor against US, but more of someone who doesn't want to stand the bully. That's really is a Chinese line.
Then there's kind of simultaneous to the Xi's statements around like the next day after that, the satellite images of the Economist headline is they call it Xi's shells. It's kind of a joke on seashells, shells, like nuclear missile shells. And I'm not I'm kind of surprised to see the Economist making jokes like that, but that's the title of the headline. Xi's shells, a silo building spree, raises questions about China's nukes. Some could be decoys, but America is concerned about and there's a photo here. I'll tweet out the article from the Tech News Twitter account, which you can see by looking at my photo here now. You see the TNATW above my head? That's the Twitter account. So if you go there, you will now see this article from The Economist about...
The Economist is trying to be down with the kids now, Tyler. I find that really cool. Someone's giving some feedback to them to say, be a little bit more playful. We'll get some more readership. Come on.
Do you see that joke, though? Xi's shells, a silo building spree, raises questions about China's nukes. Some could be decoys, but America's concerned. China's nuclear arsenal is piddling by America or Russian standards. The country has scarcely 200 warheads, reckons America's Department of Defense, and perhaps 100 or so intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBMs. Until last week, it had only 16 known silos for latest generation ICBMs, so eyebrows were raised when satellite imagery revealed 120 new ones being built in the desert of Gansu province in western China. The silos near the city of Yumen were identified by researchers for the James Martin Center of Non-Proliferation Studies as American think tank, whose findings were published on the it seems America's concerned about these silos, intercontinental ballistic missile silos being built in Yumen, China. But
I think it's more accurate to say that American media is more
yeah,
concerned. I think the journalist is
uh-huh,
they like to focus, and the rumors are very dangerous. And I do not know what exactly are the purpose of these silos or these pictures, but
yeah,
I don't think it's in anybody's interest to to make nuclear threat against each other. I mean, come on,
yeah,
if you talk about nuclear warhead, the U.S. has probably 20 times as much nuclear warhead than China. So
yeah.
anyway, that's it.
Yep. Okay. So other interesting news going on. We've got is JT with us? He's DM'd one saying that he needed me to read it for him, I think. That Oculus, the big VR headset company, plans to enable what they call DLC and in-app purchases for App Lab developers later this year. And this is a huge headline, believe it or not. Let me explain. This whole future e-commerce through VR, AR that we dream about, walking down the street and being able to click on anybody walking by and buy the shoes that they're wearing or the shirt or jacket or their bag or whatever, sunglasses. That's only possible if you have quote unquote in-app purchases to enable e-commerce inside of that, which doesn't actually exist today. But the headline today is that Oculus plans to enable in-app purchases for App Lab developers later this year. So we are currently working on adding support for in-app purchases on App Lab and are aiming for an update later this year. While App Lab games can be free or paid, they can't currently offer add-ons like downloadable content, that's DLC, or in-app purchases, IAPs. And but all of that is coming. So the downloadable content is essentially digital content, and then in-app purchases are things that could be physical purchases, even like buying somebody's backpack just by clicking on it and picking the option that is most appropriate to you. So it's the piping within the e-commerceification of VR and AR is coming. And I realized something yesterday for the first time that I thought was rather um, potentially profound, which is if there is e-commerce in the VR AR space, and we now know there will be. This article helps us kind of connect those dots. Actually, the when you're walking down the street in this with your AR VR glasses, the revenue potential through e-commerce for that headset, whether it be Facebook Oculus or Apple's eye goggles or whatever they call it, will be so tremendous because now a big part of your purchases will no longer be Amazon. It'll be whatever Apple wants it to be. So Apple's empowering, or Facebook Oculus is empowering. If you're wearing Facebook Oculus and you see somebody walking by, and you can now see floating price tags above somebody's back, any item, a hat, you're in a hat shop, every hat in the shop will have a floating digital price tag above it that you can click and purchase it through e-commerce. Now, Facebook is not going to send you to Amazon to make that purchase. Oh, no, 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 no. Unless Amazon does some kind of big deal to give Facebook a percentage of those sales. Facebook's going to link you to whatever is in their best interest, whatever gets them the highest commission. And that's already being implemented as we speak with Shopify at the moment, by the way, inside of Instagram and WhatsApp and Facebook Marketplace. That headline was made as a result of Mark Zuckerberg in his live audio room about a week ago. So the point is that the future of e-commerce is no longer you walking around with your phone, going into stores, going to Amazon, opening Amazon's app, comparing the price inside the Amazon app with the hat in the shop or the shoe inside the shoe store, whatever. It's you walking down the street. Every fucking thing within your vision can be clicked on and it will show a price tag. And then with one more click, you can purchase it. The question is, who is that going to be Amazon? No, it's not, because Amazon doesn't have a VR headset. Facebook does. Google likely will. Apple very certainly will. And they're going to benefit, not Amazon. My point is the revenue that they are going to generate by replacing Amazon is so tremendous. The amount of shopping that you're going to do through your AR or VR will be so high. You're going to be spending thousands of dollars a year of shopping through this device, that it will then make sense for them to give you the device for practically free. And when that happens, when the device gets down to $99, then it's wide, huge mass adoption. And that's a prediction that I'm willing to make, is the economics are so clear in this, and that on a smartphone, because AR is only just starting on smartphones, we don't really have AR shopping on smartphones yet, although that will come as well. But if we could do the same in phones would be free too. But it's not there yet. And it's just this whole vision of AR shopping is so much easier in these AR headsets and glasses than through the phone. So I'm predicting we very much have arrived at the VR revolution, because the headsets are going to be subsidized by the companies because of the amount of money they're going to be able to make by e-commerceifying the AR shopping experience.
Yeah, and Tyler, the other interesting build on this from a data perspective is, you imagine like cohorts of people. So there's a general saying, people like themselves. So like, can you imagine the influencer space of like, imagine a wish list, or imagine like Tyler has got these products in these frames, and Dave could click into Tyler and go, I trust him from a tech perspective. What brands has he got? And then I just go, buy. So I'm buying into the brand, the person, the whole cohort of the person and the product. So I think the other interesting space is like the influencers and the cohorts and the people dynamic behind the data.
Well, and to link it with the earlier conversation, I think that there's also a geopolitical dimension as well. So earlier I tweeted an article from the World Economic Forum that compared the 2021 projected social commerce spend between the U.S. and China. And China was roughly $363 billion projected in social commerce for this year, and the U.S. was at $36 billion. So I think that it'll just be really interesting to watch how the U.S. government, plays nicely with our big tech giants while still trying to rein them in, because they're also keeping an eye on what's happening in China.
There was on this point of like the future of e-commerce, we've had two headlines in the past 3 or 4 days. One of a friend of mine in Santa Monica just raised money for a Shopify for mobile. You guys remember this? My buddy Sina, who I angel invested in his last startup, and he raised like $50 million for his new Shopify for mobile apps. And then there was an article yesterday or the day before about Shopify for kids. Remember this? So even kids could make their own digital lemonade stands in America. Cheryl, you remember saying, why are Americans so obsessed with, having their kids making money in this kind of way and whatever. And now there's another one in the news today of another Shopify for mobile apps. So it's this whole space is getting very hot very quickly, although they certainly have their work cut out for them to try and compete with Shopify and all of this when they're partnering with the major social media apps to enable these cute little shops inside of everything. And then we had an article yesterday about the creator of the Tom Cruise deep fake TikTok videos that have become very viral, where I think most of you have seen these, where it shows Tom Cruise talking to a camera like he's on TikTok, and then he's playing golf, and then he comes back to the camera, and it looks incredibly convincing. Like, if you didn't tell anyone, I think people would be willing to bet a lot of money that that's actually Tom Cruise, and in reality, it's not. It's somebody named Chris Ume, who has now created a sort of business out of this. He says it's a startup co-founded by the creator of the viral Tom Cruise deepfake TikTok videos, has pledged to set ethical standards as it sells tech to brands. Although in reality, goddamn well that's going to end up in the hands of everybody before long. But of course, the way to monetize that technology is to sell it to people who are willing to pay a lot for it, which are companies. So he's doing the enterprise approach, but it's really only a matter of time before that gets in the hands of every, you know, literally everybody, and then you're going to have a truly dystopian deep fake epidemic, Cambrian explosion of incredibly creative yet very concerning videos of Dr. Fauci saying that the vaccine is actually going to kill you. And I predict now that video is coming. And I'm trying to think of what other very dystopian deep fake videos will happen. Of, you know, world leaders announcing they're launching missiles tomorrow and all, you know, that's all coming. And if you think the social media networks have their hands full today with, you know, we talk about this often, most recently exemplified by the friction between Twitter and India, where India is constantly telling Twitter, you have to take down these tweets, and Nigeria told Twitter to do this, and then they get kicked out, and then Russia's telling YouTube to take down these videos. Well, what happens when you have videos of Vladimir Putin masturbating on YouTube? Well, that's coming, and we're going to find out what happens when that happens, because that's going to happen. Mark my words. You can bet every penny you have that's going to happen by the end of this year. So what happens when, you know, this new level of deep fakeness comes into play, and you've got all these world leaders being lampooned into, you know, having sex with animals, you know, on Twitter and on TikTok and all of this? It's coming. I mean, Vladimir Putin notoriously doesn't appreciate the LGBTQ community. Can you imagine what they will do with that information? What kind of TikToks they might make with Vladimir Putin being so anti-gay as he is? I think it's fairly obvious what's going to happen. And let's see how the Kremlin responds to TikTok when somebody has those videos of Vladimir engaging in those activities.
The tools
Interesting
that they have
times.
are basically hacking, and that's what they have. So they'll try and use those, I guess.
Oh, they'll try and stop TikTok with, yeah, it's going to be wild. I mean, it's already crazy right now where the governments are already trying to control tweets, text tweets. They're concerned, you know, they're getting their feelings hurt over, you know, text tweets. Wait until you see how their feelings get hurt over deepfake videos. And watch the amount of control. By the way, Russia this week now updated, similar to India, identical to India. They're now forcing all of these American big tech companies who want to maintain business in Russia must now have offices with Russian citizens as employees in their country who are responsible for and act as the correspondent to be able to address these issues in person, in real time. Interesting to see Russia be, you know.
This is really interesting because if you think about it from a global leader and a chest beating like whoever it is, Vladimir Putin, whoever else, essentially they're after two things: power to feed their pride, and you imagine just how much this takes both of those two P's away from them, because, you know, in effect, someone else just, you know, being able to do what you described, you know, he has no power over it, and it massively insults his pride. I just think it's quite interesting if you look at the real motivation and what drives these people.
The psychology behind it. Yeah, it's really interesting.
Why wouldn't a state actor use it themselves? Why wouldn't someone like Russia use it themselves to forward their own agenda? We're assuming it's only one way.
Gareth, get closer to your mic. You're about half volume right now.
Oh, sorry about that. How's that? Any better?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just saying we're assuming it's one way. We're assuming those state actors aren't going to use it to further their own aims in terms of propaganda, etc.
Oh, like they'll use deepfakes to their own benefit. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, I look forward to your creative ideas as to what kind of campaigns you expect, and if the Donald Trump, the very rumored Donald Trump P tape doesn't exist, it will soon. You could certainly manufacture that in deepfakes, yeah. So there's Faraz, you just sent in one about the rise of cyborgs, which this is a truly wild image on the front of this.
You got to read this color and you got to unpack it, which is crazy.
Okay. So I just tweeted it out. I retweeted Froz's tweet, and how that works for those who are new is you can send in an article. You can jump up on stage and share it, as many people do, or from the convenience of the audience or on stage, you can send a tweet from your personal Twitter account. Just include our Twitter account, TNATW, which you can see on my photo. Click on my head to see the Twitter account. And if you include that in your tweet, then we'll see it. And it makes it very simple for us to click retweet on your tweet to our now 3,500 and very fast growing list of beautiful people who follow us on Twitter. And this article that Faraz just tweeted in and I just retweeted says that the inside the technology transcending human biological limits, from reality enhancing implants to brain controlled exoskeletons, breakthroughs in biotech have fueled a new fusion of machinery and organic matter. Humans are integrating with technology, not in the future, but now, with the emergence of custom prosthetics that make us stronger and faster, neural implants that change how our brains work, and a new senses and abilities that you've never dreamed of having. It's time to start imagining what a better version of you might look like. Some call it transhumanism. It's not a philosophy. It's not a philosophy cybernetics expert Kevin Warwick associates himself with, but he can't deny he's a cyborg, or was. Warwick had a 2.5 centimeter long radio frequency identification RFID chip implanted in his arm. Back then, he was considered risky, even reckless. He went ahead anyway, creating a media circus as he demonstrated how the chip made him remotely traceable to a computer and allowed him to open and automatically secure doors at the University of Sheffield lab without touching them. 4 years later, despite warnings from a surgeon, he had neural interfaces implanted that allowed him to control a robotic arm on another continent and communicate nervous system to nervous system with his wife, Irina, via electrodes in her arm. And that was the most profound thing I did, he says, recalling how he first felt the pulses of her transmitted signals in his finger. Warwick eventually had his implants removed, but he remains for some the original cyborg. Others look upon such tampering with the human body such as a progression of what's been happening for thousands of years. For Liviu Babitz, the co-founder of London-based company Cyborg Nest, which makes sensor enhancement devices we've been integrating with technology since we started aiming arrows at bears. Isn't an arrow an extension of your hand? And we're all cyborgs at this stage. And the article goes on and shows a really amazing photo of a person with a bionic arm, and it looks like, and leg. So he had his arm and his leg were somehow removed, and they've been replaced with what looks like something right out of a Marvel comic. Honestly, he looks like he has the arm of Iron Man. Honestly, and you can see really other interesting photos of an individual with somebody with an antenna coming out of their head, and other individuals with bionic legs that are controlled by their brain. Somebody who's not able to normally walk can now walk and controls the bionic legs with their brain, like most people control their legs with their brains, but this allows somebody who is normally unable to walk, and gives many other interesting examples with some very nice photos that I just tweeted out at the Tech News Twitter account. And Stockholm is no stranger to this. We have an individual of our geek community, and one of the co-working spaces notoriously has made it an option for all of its members to have a chip implanted to open the front door. Hannes runs a monthly cyborg meetup event where anyone can come get a free implant that would allow them to open the door at their office, essentially. And there's now thousands of people in Stockholm who have this, actually. So it's
Tyler, maybe the team know this,
yeah.
but like I find it very interesting to understand that there's a software release cycle in the same way as we get releases to Apple products or whatever product. There's the same release cycle to these like hardware prosthetics for the body. So they're always like constantly tuning what's
Are you guys
happening in the.
serious? You knew about this stuff? I mean, other than the RFID stuff, I thought you guys would be like surprised. You guys are so normal about this. It's like normal on this
Yeah,
stage.
this is yeah,
It's kind of normal.
Chris, Chris. If
I find myself, I'm quite weird. I have to live with myself for us.
no, this is this is falls under what we've called transhumanism. It's a people have been playing with this for a very long time, and there hasn't actually been that much progress made, as much as one would think. In We're making far more progress in many other areas, and you're not seeing that many people doing this kind of thing. It's still quite novel, and the use cases haven't been that impressive, honestly. So there's not it's not like a growing trend within the tech ecosystem. People are doing it, and everything in the article is true. And I've heard of Kevin Warwick before, but it's just some geeks playing around. And the more useful case is the most wide scale use case is Stockholm and Hannes, who's and the co-working space called Epicenter, where there's hundreds of members, in fact thousands of members at Epicenter, and every one of them has the option once a week. Well, Hannes is available to do RFID chip embeds, so that allow you to not use your in Sweden. Everyone uses plastic cards in their wallet to open doors. It's an incredibly common thing to do there, and you can replace it with this chip in your hand if you want to, and many people do. It's incredibly common in Stockholm amongst the geek community. So it's that part has kind of lost its novelty, and it's become quite functional and usable. But the all of the other things um, are these are all quite separate technologies, honestly, like allowing brain controlled
I
exoskeletons
mean,
that allow people to walk.
the healthcare implications of having a prosthetic that looks like Iron Man's arm, Tyler. I
Yeah.
mean, that's what I'm looking at here.
Yeah, there's interesting things happening with prosthetics, and those touch on tech, and it certainly touches on health tech. But the rate of progress is, um, it's fast, but it's not VR, AI, machine learning fast, like the or even blockchain. Like, I guess geeks get a little they like to follow the momentum of things, and this particular area isn't having impressive headlines every 2 weeks like many other areas of tech is. So it doesn't really catch that much of the
I
geek
think it
fascination.
I think it relates to the regulation. I think it relates to how the industry, medtech in general, needs to raise money and the product cycles. It should be the highest tech sector, but it's not really. Once you get in here, you kind of learn like, they're
No,
not
but
really
Chris,
doing that
think
advanced
about
stuff.
this, right? Because at the end of the day, no matter what any government says, healthcare is the least is the bottom of their agenda. Military, arms, defense systems. This is always the top of every government, no matter what anyone says. And I'm happy to debate anyone on that topic. So
The
imagine.
most of this whole category, and it touches it in this article, is the Neuralink is the one company in this space that does get a lot of geek excitement because of its potential to unlock even the future beyond VR, because then you don't even need the glasses and mask anymore. You could plug right into the vision cortex of your brain, and now the gap between today's reality and virtual reality, there's a gap there, and the goggles, the VR goggles, AR goggles, help bridge that gap. But Neuralink would erase that gap, where there would no longer be a difference between physical reality, base reality, and virtual reality. Your digital reality and your base reality become completely intermixed at that point, and you can imagine your shoes changing every 30 seconds to whatever shoes you want, and you can imagine anything visually, and it can happen in real time, you can imagine you're in Paris, you can imagine you're in Dubai, and you can imagine you're in Dubai 500 years ago, and how your reality becomes incredibly fluid at that point, and that's why Neuralink gets so much attention, as it should, because conceivably it's on track that could be happen in our lifetime. So
No, but David,
that's
just
sort of
one
the
last
yeah.
point. Just one last point. What I was saying was, for example, if you have veterans that, God forbid, go out and lose an arm, and then
Yeah.
they have to leave the military or go get another job or get a prosthetic arm, and you now have a company that can give them a prosthetic arm that can do 10 times a better job, or even,
Right.
for example, pick up a tank or punch a hole in a wall or things like
Yeah.
that, then the military and the governments have the funding available and they would be deploying into it. Have you heard anything about something like that?
No, and nor would we. That would be way secret shit if
They
they were
they
doing stuff
they
like that.
they are working on exoskeletons and stuff like that, but that's kind
See,
of widely
that's what I'm
known.
saying, right? So if it's for healthcare, they would never do it. But if the healthcare has an implication towards defense systems and all that sort of stuff, they'll do it.
Yeah, they're working on a really like a suit that the soldiers can wear, and like it basically helps them endure longer because the suits do an assist in like harvesting energy and like stuff like that. So it's just it's there. It's just everything's trickled down, and unfortunately, like you stated, for Oz, healthcare is at the bottom of the bucket for the government, and the innovation doesn't happen there. And then, lastly, the issue is like to put a new product on the market, meaning completely novel, is challenging because you have to spend so much money to prove clinical efficacy and safety. So the common approach is just take something that's already on the market and say that you're just like it. And so because of that, there's not much innovation. Imagine if you released a new phone and you're just like, yeah, well, it's the iPhone 3, but just this year's version that's the exact same thing. So that's how that this industry works, unfortunately.
Hmm. So there's a bunch of headlines that people I'm now getting to the endless waterfall of fantastic tech headlines that people are tweeting in using the TNATW Twitter account. Gareth, you just sent in one. The Prime Minister of Vietnam now orders the Central Bank of Vietnam to conduct cryptocurrency pilot implementation. So you can add Vietnam. Somebody should make an interesting dual list. The countries that have come out that are it could be the spectrum from very pro crypto to very anti crypto, and clearly on the pro, maybe you make 10 different lists, and clearly on the pro crypto you have El Salvador as kind of the most extreme pro, and then on the most anti, um, interesting to see who would be on that list and kind of fill in the middle. And now you can add Vietnam to the list of testing things, along with Israel and Palestine and a whole slew of other countries, all now interested in testing out cryptocurrency pilots, as the Prime Minister of Vietnam has mandated the country's central bank to study and pilot cryptocurrency implementation. And Gareth, you also sent in another one about a nanofiber membrane that could help solve the drinking water crisis, as Korean scientists claim a new desalinization technique makes seawater fit to drink in minutes, which I follow this space rather closely. The researchers used a membrane distillation process that results in 99.9% salt rejection for 1 month. If commercialized, they say the solution could help alleviate the drinking water crisis exacerbated by the climate change. More than 3 billion people worldwide are affected by water shortages. That's about a third of the planet. With the amount of fresh water available for each person plunging by a fifth over 2 decades, according to the UN. Indeed, at least 1/5 of people will run out of drinking water in the next 2 decades, which is 2 billion people. It's just 2 billion people without water. I mean, what could happen? I mean, they're all going to move to your country, right? 2 billion people. That's not a problem, right? Wherever you happen to live. I mean, the new study detailed a way to purify seawater using a nanofiber membrane as a salt filter. While the scientists have used membrane distillation in the past, They kept encountering a massive obstacle that slowed down the process. If the membrane became too wet or flooded, it could no longer reject the salt. Needless to say, this was a time-draining process that forced scientists to either wait for the membrane to dry or come up with additional solutions, like using pressurized air to release trapped water from its pores. To overcome the challenge, the Korean team turned to nanotechnology known as electrospinning to create their three-dimensional membrane. In scientific terms, it uses a very complex chemical as the core and silica aerosol gel mixed, etc. And then it turns into scientific gobbledygook. And hopefully, this is a new solution.
It makes an interesting point at the end, which is that the current desalination technologies, the waste products from those are they have scale problems, but then also the waste product from those are actually harmful because it creates like ultra strong sort of brine, so which has to be then disposed of, which causes other kind of issues, or that's what it hints at. So I thought that was
Yeah,
interesting as well as this idea of like, when we're looking for these solutions,
right.
what are then the unintended consequences that sort of then limit their scale. So I thought that was interesting.
And also, I didn't realize it says currently the main method for purifying seawater is through reverse osmosis at roughly 20,000 desalination plants around the world. But these facilities require vast amounts of electricity to operate and also create concentrated brine as a waste product, which is typically dumped back into the sea, which indeed over time does create a bit of a problem. So fingers crossed that that's technology works out as is needed. That's a desperately need water. So, solutions around creating drinkable water is about the most important thing we could do at this point. I would even put it. I can't think of a more important technology at this point, or project for engineers to be committing their time and energy to, and investors to be committing their money to. What else? Digital, Sarah, if you're on stage, you had this digital payments exploding in India. Is Sarah with us on stage? The Temasek-backed Pine Labs payment platform for merchants in India, offering solutions for in-store and online payments, prepaid loyalty, and that's just essentially the financial plumbing and pipes that get, which is why India's gotten to that point where they've got the fintech plumbing in place, and now they've got fintech unicorns popping off like crazy. It's kind of a
Yeah,
trusty.
Tyler, on that one, in Pine Labs, Fidelity and the particular wing that just made I think it's 300 or $400 million investment into it. Um,
600 million.
yeah, the total is 600, Sarah, but there's two
Ah, you're
parties
right.
involved.
There are two investors. And what's
There's two
interesting in
investors.
this news is it's really to look at also the development of UPI. And while we're still expecting the final numbers for June, we're already seeing the estimated numbers that are showing an explosion of the UPI. So, the Indian infrastructure for real-time payments that are bypassing the cards. They are continuing to grow at phenomenal pace. And the transaction volume has increased tremendously to reach now 74 billion, over 2.8 billion transaction in June alone. So it seems that the Indian ecosystem, when it comes to the digital payments, has taken off, and that obviously questions the future for the card rails.
Yeah, but what's more interesting as well, Sarah, is the person who runs that Fidelity division is actually our own Aaron Smith, and I pinged him, but he's sick today, so he can't come in.
Oh, it'd be great to have him. Yes, indeed.
Yeah, I did ping him, but unfortunately he's sick. So I'll leave it at that, Tyler and
Another
Sarah.
day.
So
Yeah.
somebody found the article. It's from the Independent in the UK. Putin takes on big tech by signing law forcing foreign tech companies to open Russian offices. President insists he doesn't want to block anyone, but there are problems with big tech firms. President Vladimir Putin will force foreign IT companies to open offices on Russian soil in a fresh crackdown on big tech as he attempts to exert greater control over the internet. Under new rules, tech companies will be obliged to create sites on Russian territory that could face penalties, such as bans for failing to comply. And makes you wonder, why do they need to be there physically exactly? What is it about emails that what is it about having physical people on the physical ground that's so important? One must wonder. And just what does Vladimir's very special tea taste like? The and by the way, on that same point about Twitter in India, where Twitter has to put what they call a resident on the ground grievance officer in Delhi. It's now been 42 days since they're, and they can't seem to get somebody on the ground to take that position because they will almost certainly be arrested. So it's quite a difficult position that Twitter finds itself in, indeed. And the prediction is Twitter will continue to operate in India as long as until India cuts the pipe off. I think that's the standoff now. Is Twitter is no longer complying. They have no intention of complying. They can't put somebody on the ground as the rules say. And then the question is going to be, what is India going to do about that exactly?
Tyler,
Yes.
I told you Singapore has freedom of speech. Facebook and Twitter are all in Singapore.
Yes. What's your point?
That means Singapore has freedom of speech because all these tech companies are happy to be in Singapore. They are not worried.
Uh-huh. I don't understand your point.
That means if they play by the rules, they are very welcome in Singapore. So if they dare to be in Singapore, and if they are doing their business properly, there won't be any trouble. Because they are all in Singapore. That's what I'm trying to say. You say that the Twitter don't want to have someone in India on site, right? But they are happy to have people in Singapore on site. They are not getting
Right.
any trouble from Singapore. In fact, they are collaborating with Singapore government.
Right. I don't know if they have people on the ground in Singapore or not. I don't think they do.
They have office there.
Uh-huh. Okay. I still don't understand your point.
Freedom of speech.
What about it?
Because many people are saying Singapore has no freedom of speech, right?
So you just want to make the point that Singapore has freedom of speech, and your proof is that Twitter has an office in Singapore. That's your proof that Singapore has freedom of speech.
Facebook too. That means they are not worried.
Okay. Well, that isn't the top. We're not even talking about Singapore at all. Why are you feel it's important to tell the audience that Singapore has freedom of speech?
Because you keep mentioning that India, nobody would dare to go to India because they'll be invited by the Indian government or the police, right?
That Twitter's not able to find somebody to be their compliance officer in India because that compliance officer will be jailed.
Why is that so?
Why is the person going to be jailed? Because Twitter lost its platform protection. So Twitter's responsible for everything that is said on Twitter.
Yeah, likewise in Singapore, they are also responsible for everything that's said, right?
I don't know. We've never seen a single headline about anything to do with Twitter in Singapore.
No, the thing is, because many foreign countries are saying that Singapore has no media freedom, no freedom of speech.
Maybe that was a conversation you had in another room. I've never had any conversations about
I never heard
Singapore
anything like that.
and Twitter or Facebook or anything like that.
Okay, great. Maybe.
Yeah,
Let's just move.
I've never made any comments about Singapore or Twitter or Facebook or anything like that.
Press freedom, no?
I don't know. What was said? What are you addressing?
It's all right. No worries. Move on.
Okay, so it's been 42 days, according to the Indian Express. Already been 42 days. Twitter can't take enough time to appoint resident grievance officer. The center also told the court that this attitude of Twitter cocks a snook at the digital sovereignty of India. Cocks a snook. That's my new favorite phrase. At the digital sovereignty of India, adding that there's been non-compliance for 42 days. And so the question now is, it's rather clear that Twitter's not going to put somebody there to comply as India demands. So what's going to happen next? Twitter's going to keep doing what it's doing. I mean, Twitter's just going to keep tweeting. And so will India ban Twitter in India? Because that's what's going to have to be the next move in this tennis match. The ball's now in India's court. Twitter's not complying. What are you going to do, India? And clearly India keeps saying, you need to comply, you need to comply, you need to comply. And Twitter says, who are you again? We're not replying to your emails anymore. And so now it's the ball's in India's court, and let's see what India does. I guess they would ban Twitter from India and for not complying. And that will be very interesting to see if that's the outcome in this. I think that's a safe assumption. They banned all of the Chinese apps. Next headline is that Skyborg makes its second flight, this time autonomous piloting General Atomics Avenger drone, which I got to tweet this out so that you can see this. And thank you to whoever sent it in. The Air Force conducted a second flight test of a robot pilot known as Skyborg. Oh, what a lovely name. Which autonomously flew a General Atomics MQ-20 Avenger drone. The event comes after 2 months after the first flight of the Skyborg autonomous core system, and it proves that the system can be used to pilot multiple times of unmanned aircraft. The Skyborg from 2 different manufacturers demonstrates the portability of the government-owned autonomous core, unlocking future multi-mission capabilities for the joint force, said Major General Heather Pringle, commander of Air Force Research Laboratory. With Skyborg, the Air Force hopes to eventually field an expendable, loyal, wingman-style drone that can accompany manned tactical jets into battle, taking on missions that may be too dangerous for human fighter pilots. The MQ-20 flight took place during the Orange Flag exercise at Edwards Air Force Base, California, over a period of about 2 hours and 30 minutes after a human operator launched the Avenger drone and flew it to a safe altitude. It passed control of the aircraft to the ACS, the Air Force said in a statement. So it's not far off from, look at this rate, we will have unmanned autonomous flying fighter craft, essentially armed. The drones will essentially be flying airplanes in the same way that the cars are going to be autonomous. It looks like the fighter airplanes will be autonomous as well in the future. So we can add fighter pilots to the ever-growing list of jobs that will be replaced by autonomous technologies. But it's a really interesting looking aircraft. It's a autonomous aircraft is what it is, with a militarized armed missiles and the whole shebang.
Future
And
fighter pilots will be gamers, right? I mean, like today's gamers,
oh,
in a
right, yeah,
sense,
well,
right?
that's a great point. They could do them remotely first, perhaps. Yeah. Instagram confirms exclusive stories for accounts to start members clubs. And this is now Instagram catching up to Twitter with all of their new super follower features. Instagram confirms following in the first paragraph says it exactly right. Following in the footsteps of Twitter's subscription model, as I just said, Instagram has now confirmed it's working on a new paid feature they call exclusive stories for the past 2 weeks. Screenshots of the rumored feature have been circulating online. Instagram later confirmed that the screenshots were of an internal prototype the company was working on. According to sources, users who chance upon exclusive stories will be told only members can view the content. It also appears that viewers won't be allowed to screenshot these videos. Well, of course not. You're paying for access to it. They won't let you screenshot it, of course. So the content creators might have to add previews of these paid stories, so they're highlights, in order to entice followers into shelling out for the subscription. Though Instagram has yet to announce the launch date for this feature, it's clear the company is following other social media platforms and developing new ways to keep content creators in the app. Exactly, because if you're getting paid to share content on Twitter, why would you be sharing it on Instagram when you can make money by sharing it on Twitter? Now, Instagram has no choice but to copy these new Twitter features, which are called super followers on Twitter, and what they're calling exclusive stories on Instagram. And this is going to be a huge blow to OnlyFans, because Twitter doesn't have a policy banning porn, and Instagram does publicly because people can flag it, but privately, if it's exclusive content people are paying for, I think there's going to be an incredible explosion of direct creator to consumer porn, which OnlyFans kind of pioneered. Actually, my friend Cyan Bannister really pioneered with her site Zivity, which was just a decade too early. And then OnlyFans popularized, and now Twitter is going to monetize that, along with, of course, many other forms of content. And now
Another quick
Instagram
comment.
has to copy it.
Uh,
Yes, for us.
if Twitter goes down this route of porn, etc., or is already, I am quite confident the same issues that have occurred in China, in India, are going to occur in the Middle East. So that takes away China, India, Middle East.
Is perhaps, but no one will see it without actually paying for it.
No, it will still it will still happen. It will still happen just based on pure experience over the past so many years having lived
So
across the world
even
and
if
then
nobody sees it
even if nobody
unintentionally,
sees it because it gives access to everyone to go in and have the ability to pay for it, and most of the Middle East is still Islamic
so
republics or Islamic monarchies.
is porn banned in the Middle East? Oh, there's no porn websites there.
They're supposed to be banned, yeah.
Yeah.
People could
Well,
use
so
people can use VPNs to get
right,
through to them. But what happens
right,
is VPN is allowed so long as your company has, or you as an entity, have gotten permission from an authority to use it, and so long as you're using it for something that is allowed by the government. Okay? Now, for
right. So
example, on
I imagine,
so for example,
yeah,
if you took a VPN and went onto a porn site, that's banned. Hence, Twitter would have to be used through VPN, and then they could
right,
even scramble that somehow. They've done it before.
right. I think I could almost, I would be willing to bet a lot that Twitter has already had conversations in countries where it thinks it could be banned in this case, and have already had those conversations. And it'd be interesting to hear how those conversations went, because that's probably why one of the reasons it took so long for this to happen. Although, due to the economic windfall that will benefit Twitter, even if the Middle East said, "Hey, we're going to have to ban you if you do that," and then Twitter went to its chief financial officer Ned and said, "Hey, Ned, can you please calculate how many billions of dollars are we expected to make by turning on super followers, which of course will include porn?" And Ned said, "Yeah, we're going to make about $50 trillion." And then they said, "Oh, okay, Middle East, it's been nice, it's been fun. We don't really care. We're going to make $50 trillion, and if we lose, however many millions of people are there, that's just kind of a what a price to pay, a part of the calculation that
No,
they
sure,
are going to have
sure.
to
So
do."
how far are they going to go with this? I mean, you got China going, you got India going, now you got Middle East going.
They
So
they never
that's
they
what I
no
was
China was never an option.
right. So in
China
India,
copied Twitter before Twitter was even done being built.
right.
So there
So
was
fine. So
Twitter never worried about China.
that's a significant population that never existed. Then you have another
Correct.
significant population that has just been gone from just left the Twitter map. Then you've got Nigeria. Now you've got African issues that'll be rising up across the continent, I imagine. Then you've got North Africa going. You've got Middle East
Yeah.
going.
Well,
What's next?
what's next is every country's going to have their own Twitter, anyways, and not just Twitter. They're going to have their own
Okay, so
TikTok,
we
their own
agree then. That's
Snapchat,
what I
their
was
own
getting
Facebook.
at. That's what I
Yeah,
was
but it's
getting at.
not because
Okay.
of porn. It's because they want the control, and they, just like Russia's now forcing these
Right.
countries
Right.
to have people on the ground. They're going to have the same problem that Twitter had, trying to get people on the ground in Twitter. They're going to have difficulty complying, and it's going to turn into a shit show. And it's essentially a way for a country to tell these companies to get out without being the one to blame for them leaving. So I think
So
Russia clearly
expectations around Twitter or any of the other big tech, be it Google or be it anyone
yeah,
else, the long-term
yes,
vision is they're all going to end up becoming American companies,
correct,
just American companies.
correct.
Okay, I
regardless
agree
of
with.
porn. Porn's just an excuse to
Regardless of
kick a
porn,
country out.
regardless of porn, forget that.
Yeah,
But
regardless of porn, exactly.
in the end, everyone is going to have their own Google, their own
Correct.
Amazon, their own everything. So this whole
Correct.
big tech thing is going to end up becoming small tech to begin with, right?
Much smaller tech.
Right. Absolutely. Okay. Got it. Thanks.
Not. It'd be interesting to see what percentage of Google and Facebook and Instagram of Twitter is the revenue comes from international.
Right. Well, because
And
that was the thesis that I was playing on. In the long term, I think every country is going to end up having its own. Okay.
yeah, well, between America and Europe, and by the way, Joe Biden told at the G7 meeting in Cornwall, the G7 don't go too hard on our tech companies because the EU's planning, just like the US is planning on cracking down on big tech. And Biden reportedly told the G7, hey, don't worry, we'll take care of our big tech companies. You don't need to let us deal with them. You don't need to deal with them. Because I think Biden understands, as much as he wants to control the political influence of the big tech companies in the US, he doesn't want to limit their financial growth internationally. But it's sort of out of his hands because countries like uh, I mean, Russia clearly would prefer, China, most of all, clearly preferred having their own domestic alternatives, and that's worked incredibly well for them. And now other countries are realizing those benefits as well. I think India has clearly realized the benefits of kicking out the Chinese apps, and now they see the benefit of reducing the strength of the non-Indian e-commerce companies in India. Russia as well. Russia has their own Google called Yandex, and Yandex is their big tech company, and it's doing a lot of things like autonomous driving and other stuff. And they have their own Twitter, although Twitter does exist there. But Russia would clearly prefer not to have these meddlesome American tech companies like YouTube doing what is, it's reported regularly, all of this upsetting content from YouTube and Twitter and all of these networks within Russia. And Vladimir is constantly telling them to take this stuff down. And it's an endless cat and mouse game. And that's why he's now saying, I'm tired of sending you emails and I'm tired of you ignoring my emails. Put somebody in the office on the ground here that can't ignore me. Because if they do ignore me, I'm going to come down to their office in person and have just a friendly little chat. I promise.
I mean, I
So
find you $11 million, and you just don't take me seriously.
I feel like
on
you don't
another
love.
page, Chris.
I feel like you don't love me, Twitter.
Sorry,
And
Tyler. On another page, if you look at it, right, because
yeah,
you got Africa, and then you got Middle East, which has
yes,
alliances with China, right? So
yeah,
if these guys go back home to the US, we already have
yeah,
WeChat, we got Alipay, we got
right,
every one of these down there, but not to full functionality because you've got the
right,
Americans down here as well. So if the
right.
Americans go back home, then it gives room to the Chinese to come in. So China's already won the war on Africa.
Potentially. Well, Africa doesn't.
Okay.
I mean, ask Messi and ask Mabwana how they feel about Africa. I mean, every time the topic comes up about China and Africa, and you talk to Africans on the ground, I've not spoke. I've spoken to dozens, um, multiple times. I don't think I've heard one express positive feelings towards
No,
China.
they usually don't. They usually don't. They usually don't. But then again, I mean, the Nigerians did like what happened there. But when was it up to the Nigerian population?
In the case, gets interesting because in the case of Nigeria banning Twitter, it was an Indian Twitter clone, Ku, who then jumped up and introduced himself to Nigeria and said, "Hey,
Exactly my
Nigeria,
point.
we hear you're having problems with Twitter, but we're an Indian." But what's interesting about this Indian one is they're clearly positioning themselves as a government-friendly alternative to Twitter that plays very friendly with the government and isn't run by Americans who have their own unique interpretations of freedom of speech. So
Very interesting
maybe
thesis.
right. So you could have Ku, the Indian one, start to
Or
grow
China.
internationally. The one from China is called Weibo. I don't think you're going to see Weibo adoption broadly outside of China.
Yep.
The
Right.
Chinese Twitter,
Cloud
especially
and all of that is China because China's got Huawei pumping
the
in 50 billion into every country.
getting right to the heart of the 5G issue. You've
Yeah,
got the Huawei 5G towers. That's been the heart of that battle. You also have Alibaba Cloud, which is arguably the biggest Chinese cloud company, which is
bingo.
trying to spread internationally. Hasn't had a whole lot of success. The American cloud companies, notably Amazon Web Services, Google Cloud, and Microsoft Azure, are absolutely dominating the planet in terms of cloud. And I don't
But
think
they'll all go
Alibaba
home.
Cloud's going to have a lot of adoption internationally either.
Anyways, sorry to take the conversation off track, but I just thought
No,
it was a
not at
very
all.
interesting topic.
That's the big game we're in, and we can look at how the 5G really exposed who's on whose side in this, because it was one of the first instances where the US is telling its allies, do not use Huawei 5G. Everyone needs 5G. Everybody, we all need it.
Yeah, so
Okay,
on that
you have
point, if you
two.
remember, Joe Biden made the
Yeah,
threat to the United Arab
yeah,
Emirates, saying we won't give you the
yeah.
F-35s if you continue with Huawei, but nothing happened.
Correct. Correct. He did sell them, even though he said he wouldn't. Correct. And the UAE essentially called Joe Biden's bluff and said, "Well, we're going to cozy up with China a little bit, even though you said the cost of doing so would be the purchase of all these jets. But we actually think you're still going to sell these jets to us anyways because you're a greedy bastard." So, turns out, yeah, he is. He was willing to sell them anyways. So the UAE exposed a bluff in that poker hand, that you could still be friendly with China and the US would still sell you military stuff.
No, regardless of the fact, the U.S., in essence, in the long term, in my humble opinion, with respect to the United States and the entities, has lost the battle globally. That's what it sounds like.
In what sense?
With cloud, with these major tech giants owning most of the
Well,
space on account
yeah,
of
I
these
think
issues that we're seeing today.
yeah, but I don't think it's so much about America, the American tech companies losing.
American entities,
Yeah,
entities with their headquarters in the United States.
yeah. My point is that the realization of countries wanting to have more control and understanding, hey, we don't need to rely on these big tech companies, international, wherever they're from, China or Europe or wherever. Everyone wants to have their own sovereign clouds under their own control by their own companies, and they want their own Twitter, and they want their own Amazon, and they want their own all of these things because governments are starting to realize the power of data. That's fundamentally what it comes down to. Is they've woken up, they've realized data is actually the new oil, and it's now a new control battle around data and who's got it and who doesn't and who's got the keys to the servers and where are the servers. And that's where Bitcoin comes in. And that's where crypto comes in, blockchain comes
Blockchain.
in a way. Yeah. So
and,
that's the
and
next eventual.
and Starlink, because it allows the internet to pretty much be totally free, as not free as
Now
in free
that's
from
another
cost, but
amazing point. I mean,
free
the
from control.
Starlink is another topic because then Starlink is the only one that remains, right?
Well, it's
No
debated.
one needs the power
We
of
don't.
Starlink.
It's that's a debatable point, and it has been debated, and it will continue to be debated until we see how it plays out, particularly in places like Russia, where Russia has said they are banning it, and it'll be interesting to see because Russian hackers are about as good as you can find, and if anyone's able to circumvent that the Russians will be able to, and we will know in the hacker community if Russian hackers are able to get Starlink working in Russia against the Kremlin's wishes. We're not entirely sure yet of the tech stack that enables it. If every receiver dish needs to be tied to a telecommunication network in some capacity, if the traceability of the receivers, the satellite receivers, it comes down to that, because of course the satellites are broadcasting the signal globally, but that doesn't do you any good if you don't have a receiver. So you pay for $500, it's actually $400, for the Starlink satellite receiver so that you can receive the signals being blasted from the satellites. And without that receiver, you don't have Starlink, essentially, even though the signals are clearly landing on your soil. And nobody can stop those satellite signals from landing on their soil, but you can stop people from, you can try to stop people from attaining satellite receivers or activating and utilizing satellite receivers. And the
Heard
question
of
is,
jail?
how are those satellite receivers integrated with the telecommunication system on the ground in a way that gives the country the power to block the usage of those satellite receivers? It's not entirely clear yet, but Starlink has stated that they're going to comply with any country who wants to ban it. Then they won't allow their satellite receivers to be usable in those territories. However, that's where some hardware hackers are going to try and figure out a way to make satellite receivers operable in places where the country doesn't want them to be operatable. And it's just a fun point to debate. I suspect that Starlink is actually going to make those satellite receivers not so impossible to hack to make them operable in places that countries don't want them to be operable, like North
Exactly my thoughts.
Korea, like China, like Russia, the usual suspects. Let's see. We're going to find out very soon. We'll
Tyler,
find out in the next couple months. Yes, Cheryl.
what's the difference? What's the main difference between Starlink and OneWeb?
The biggest difference is that one is run by Elon Musk and the other is run by Jeff Bezos.
But in terms of technology and
I
knowledge,
don't have either of them here in my office, so I can't answer that question yet.
okay.
I don't. We would have to do some internet
Cheryl, do you have
detective
a
work
hypothesis on that when you ask that question? Just share the hypothesis. That's quicker.
I didn't read in detail, but I saw an article, I think last month, that they are having a war, like, satellite war in space now. Because I think there was this Starlink satellite that almost crashed into OneWeb satellite. I think they were only like 170 feet apart. So I'm just wondering what's the difference. And why is that? Why is it that we are always talking about Starlink and not really talking about OneWeb? That's the reason I asked the
because
question.
Starlink will be operational in August, and they were the pioneer. And one, uh, the the other is a pure copy
OneWeb.
and clone, and is not going to be able to deploy at nearly the same pace that Starlink did, and so it's still many months away,
Okay.
if not years.
It's competing then.
So, well, yeah, it's a copy. Yeah, I mean, it's like when Henry Ford made the first car, and then it took a few years for other people to start making cars, but Ford changed the world with their car, the Model T. So this Starlink is changing the world. That's why we're talking about it. The other one is just a copy of something that's changing the world that will take potentially years to unfold because they don't have the same access to the same rockets to, the Starlink is built on SpaceX. SpaceX has rockets going up nearly every day now, and Blue Origin is not launching rockets every day and is dependent on things like SpaceX to launch its satellites. So that's why it's not as interesting. They weren't the pioneers, and nor are they the ones that actually have it active currently. It's not functional at the moment in the same way that Starlink is.
I mean, it's to the point where Bezos and my brain right now, the Virgin, they're like having a peeing contest, but literally Elon could walk into a SpaceX if his contract lets him and go into orbit tomorrow. Like that's how proficient SpaceX is at doing what they're doing versus everyone else really trying to make the first step. Those billionaires are like getting into those rockets saying, "Look how safe these rockets are. I'm going to be the first one." And Elon's like, "Well, we're launching 100 a year, since 2 or 3 years ago." So that's kind of I think that's why we're talking more about Starlink. And just for the record, I'm very agnostic. I don't idolize anybody, but I really like some of the things he's doing lately, especially the fact that he's actually doing things instead of just talking about it. And I'll get off my soapbox.
Yeah, it's a fair point. Yeah, there's the amount of grandstanding with this Virgin and the Bezos Blue Origin rocket. It's a little much. I mean, Elon's no stranger to kind of hyperbolic marketing, but I mean, we're launching manned missions to the International Space Station, which the other ones don't have any plan to do that anytime soon. So it's a different category. They're in a different league altogether, and to try and confuse consumers as if to appear on the same league is a bit disingenuous. So we are now at the top of the hour, and we'll just end on this fun one here. That Nalormi sent in. AI bot trolls politicians with how much time they're looking at their phones. This is so fantastic. You have to see this one on the Tech News Twitter account. I'm just retweeting now from Digital Dream is the Twitter account. It's Nalormi. And it shows a photo. There's a camera inside of which parliament is this exactly? Stay updated with the where is this? Where is this? Where is this? It's a picture of some kind of government, parliament. Is this the EU? Where is this? Flemish minister president playing Angry Birds. So I guess this is Belgium. So it's a video camera inside the Belgian legislature, like a house of Congress, and it's the AI that's now got this camera feed is being fed into an AI, and the AI can detect if the parliament member is on their phone, and it can facial recognize them. And you have to see this image where it now shows the parliament member sitting on whenever they start playing with their phone, it starts recording and tracking which parliament member is on their phone the most. And so it can recognize that this parliament member is on their phone 85.5% of the time, or the person sitting next to them is on their phone 76.9% of the time, and the gentleman in the row in front of them is on the phone 81.2% of the time, and the other person is 61.2% of the time, with their Twitter handles above their head. And it could very easily be connected to Twitter and start tweeting out a result each day of how much time each parliament member spent on their phone by the power of augmented reality bots. And it's a really clever website. According to the website, and let's see if this link works like I think it does. It does. Okay, so the Flemish is called driesdeporter.be. I'm just going to send you directly to the link so that you can see this from the Tech News Twitter account, which you can see on my photo is TNATW. And now you will see this really fantastic website that somebody built, and the code that they used to build it, so that you could essentially copy it and do it in your with your parliament members. And now oh my God, they did exactly what they thought they would do with this tech, which is they've now connected it to a Twitter bot, so that when their parliament members stare at their phone too long, it automatically takes a little video recording of them and tweets it. And with the headline of the tweet saying, please stay focused, with their Twitter handle. This is fully automated now. You have to see this on the Tech News Twitter account. I just sent this out, TNATW. So now a Belgian team built a Python app that takes the live feed from the parliament, does facial recognition on the parliament members, gets their Twitter account. And so when that parliament member is staring at their phone for too long, a tweet is automatically generated telling that parliament member, please stay focused, with a link to the video of them playing with their phones. Every meeting in the Flemish government in Belgium is live streamed on a YouTube channel. Software is searching for phones and tries to identify a distracted politician. With the help of an AI, the results are then posted to social media with the politician tagged, so that they see that they've been caught staring at their phones on the live stream on YouTube, and it's being shared on Twitter in real time. Oh, this is fantastic.
Yeah,
It's
they're
very
gonna
funny.
fight for this not to be televised or filmed anymore. That's what they, because this is they're all asleep. most of the time on doing other
Yes,
things.
and then the team who built this share the sources of the code. They use the Twitter API, FFmpeg for video editing, and the facial recognition and object detection is provided by Keras, and they show the actual code they used so that anyone else can do this with their Parliament members if their Parliament meetings are live streamed somewhere. It's very funny. You really have to see it and scroll through it. Anyway, that we are 13 minutes over. And I'm going to share the 12 or 13 hours of tweets that I'm going to go through now and cherry pick out all the best so that we can dive into them when we meet again in about just less than 6 hours, which, by the way, we will have a very special guest when we meet again in 6 hours, which is related to a headline that we read about 2 weeks ago about SoftBank has a new fund called the SoftBank Emerge Fund, which, when we read the headline, it was that SoftBank is launching an accelerator program for diverse startup founders in Europe, as was reported by CNBC, the Japan Times, Financial Times, Tech EU, and many others. And it says SoftBank Investment Advisors has launched its diversity-focused Emerge Accelerator program in Europe. The SoftBank partnered with Speed Invest and other venture capital investors in the continent of Europe to help run the European cohort, and the program is open to companies with at least one founder who identifies as non-white, female, LGBTQ+, disabled, or a refugee. Some of you might remember when I read the headline, and now they're going to join us when we meet again 6 hours from now to talk about the new SoftBank Emerge Fund and kind of the details of it and who can apply and what they're looking for and the benefits that they get. And it should be very cool. So do join us when we start. It's actually, I just put it in the Tech News event calendar, which you can find by clicking on the title of this room. And we will see you then in just less than 6 hours. So thank you to everybody, and we'll
Thank
see
you,
you in
Tyler.
about 6.
Thank
Thank
you,
you, Cal. Thank you, Cheryl.
Tyler.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Lakeisha,
Take
everybody.
care.
See you
Thanks,
all soon.
everyone.
Drink
Thanks,
water.
Tyler. Thanks, everyone.
Yep.
Have a
Bye,
nice
All right.
guys.
day.
Cheers.
Take care,
I'll see
Kai.
you guys after 6
Thank you,
hours.
Cheryl.
Bye.
Thanks for
Bye bye.
喝多点凉茶。